and Kimball with ANI 150, and we are picking up on the Sci-Fi crate. Now, if you watched the previous tutorial all the way to the end, you know that Maya crashed, and I hadn't followed my own rule as far as saving more frequently. And as a result, I had to go back in and quadruple check that everything, for the most part, lines up with the tutorial that we left off on. And so things that I did was go in and make sure that all of my low poly meshes match the names of the high poly meshes, the only difference being the suffix. The high polys have underscore high and the low polys have underscore low. Grabbing all of these assets, making sure that I had deleted history and frozen transformations, very important. And of course, applying the different materials to the different pieces. So if I click on this crate, I press Control A, it'll toggle over the attribute editor, and I can see that I have a crate material attached to this. And on the straps, I have straps material. And on the box material. You get the idea. These will prove to be really important once we've brought this into Substance Painter. So going back to channel box view, the other thing we did was, of course, delete history and freeze transformations. And in case you don't remember why that's important, your low poly and high poly have to share the same exact space. And if something is to be budged or moved a little bit, you want to be able to snap it back into place. Now, once upon a time, just a little quick tidbit, having meshes too close together, like having all these different polygon assets too close together, would result in some artifacting, some issues with the outcome of the ambient occlusion and the normal map bake, particularly the AO. And what you would need to do to fix those artifacts is do something called exploding your mesh. And what that would mean is that you would have a version of the mesh all assembled and another version where all the pieces had been moved away from the hole. And then you would move the high poly and the low poly pieces the exact same distance apart, so everything would be exploded out the same amount, and then you'd bake it. And because these assets would be so separated from each other, there wouldn't be that interruption in the rays, and you would end up with a cleaner bake. And then you would go back into Maya, select everything, and take all the translation nodes back to 0 and snap your mesh back together. So just kind of a fun factoid. You don't really have to do that anymore now that we have this workflow in Substance Painter. So the reason that we have to name our assets low and high ties directly into why we don't have to explode our mesh anymore. But we'll touch on that when we get into Substance Painter. For now, suffice to say, it's important that you've deleted history, frozen transformations, assigned your materials, and you're ready to export. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this low poly mesh, and I'm going to go to File and Export Selection. But before I do, kind of a fun tidbit is you can click on the box here and preset what you want your file type export to be. Mine's already set to FBX. It's my new default file extension. I don't remember what the default is set originally, but I know that when we work in the classroom computers, students usually have to hunt for the FBX export. So it actually is kind of a moot point in the classroom since they reset the computers, but you know, at least for being at home, you can go ahead and know that you can preset FBX as your default. Alright, so I'm going to export this selection, and I had done this before, so I'm just going to replace the one that I previously made, and I'm going to say yes, I want to export that selection, I want to replace it, done. So now my low poly mesh has been exported and it's ready to go. I'm going to click on this group and I'm going to turn off its visibility, and I'm going to turn on my high poly mesh. If you notice a sudden jump cut in the footage, I just figured out what was causing my recordings to stop, and so I deactivated the shortcut hotkeys for the screen recorder I'm using, so I apologize. There shouldn't be any further interruptions. Alright, so I turned off the low poly crate and I'm going to turn on this high poly crate. So, boom. You'll notice in the outliner that there's an extra high poly group. We're going to get to that. You didn't miss any steps. I just preemptively prepped this crate, and I'll explain in a moment. Let's look at this high poly. This is the high poly that we created during the last video, And this one is set to 2 because when I tried to bump the divisions to 3, it kind of upset Maya. Maya crashed. I could still do this with divisions of 3, but I would just go in and smooth each individual piece to do that. If I do it all at once, then that's when Maya freaks out. But I kept this to divisions of 2. Now, if you're following along with me and you want to make sure that you are keeping it to a similar division set as I did, then you can actually go in and change your division output. So let's say you originally smoothed this to 3. You can click any of these pieces, go into the history, and click on the poly smooth face option, and you will see that it lists the divisions from the last time that smooth was activated. And I could click in 0, and if I do that, it goes back to being a semi-low poly, a low poly that's been fenced at any rate. I could enter in 3, which would give me that really high resolution 3 division version of the crate. But I'm going to keep it at 2 because 2 is going to be fine. 2 gives me the output I want, so we'll stick with 2. Anyway, this, if we were just going to use this as our high poly, it's fine. It's totally fine. This works phenomenally. We're just going to export it, plug it into something like Substance Painter or XNormal, and that would be the results. Cool. However, that isn't the intention for this mesh, at least not yet. The intention for this mesh is to take it into another software package, specifically Zbrush, and to really sculpt and change things up a little bit. Maybe put in some of the details that we didn't put into the low poly mesh, maybe scratch it up, maybe you know, whatever you want to do. Now, how Zbrush works is it's able to handle a much higher resolution of this model. Some of you maybe noticed up here in the tabs where we have polymodeling, there's a tab next to it called Sculpting. And the Sculpting tab, yeah, you can sculpt in Maya. The difference between sculpting in Maya versus sculpting in Zbrush, however, Zbrush can handle way more topology, can handle way higher resolution models. In fact, it's going to take this crate and it's going to be divided. It's going to have a lot more divisions added upon it, and it's going to be a much heavier mesh when we sculpt. Right now, it's about 400,000 faces. In Zbrush, it'll probably be closer to 40 million faces. It can handle it, though. It's what Zbrush is designed to do. Now, why does it need to chop up the mesh? It needs to chop up this mesh because this current if I were to like grab a face on here and I were to push it in or push it out, it's still going to look pretty choppy. It's not going to be a clean sculpt. It's going to need more topology. And how Zbrush accomplishes this is it's going to add a whole lot of divisions. It's going to, let's see here, why is my hotkey not working? There it goes. Sorry, my key was sticking. So it's going to add divisions based on the current topology, and because these are rectangles, because there's like these wide gaps and then over here there's some short gaps, it's gonna have, without like, unless we retopologize it in Zbrush, it's not gonna have a nice even surface to sculpt on, and it's gonna affect the way the Zbrush sculpts our mesh. So what I would recommend doing, and it's something that I've already done, is retopologizing. Even if you don't retopologize everything, because you'll notice there are pieces on here like the top box and these straps where it's not quite as bad as the main crate. So you don't have to retopologize everything, but I'd recommend retopologizing the main crate. That much I would retopologize. And Maya has a new retopology tool, and so I'm going to show you how to use it real quick just to get a better output on this crate. And so I'm going to press Control 1 or Command 1 on my Mac, and I'm going to go under Mesh, and I'm looking for Retopologize, not Remesh. Remesh is going to break it into tries. Retopologize is going to keep it as quads, and I'm going to click the little option box. Okay, reset. So these are the default options. The default options, you have an option to keep the original if you want. That could be nice. I don't need to because I already duplicated. Target face count. So this is where it's going to reconfigure where it's going to reconfigure the mesh, and it's going to try to aim for this number of faces. Now currently this has 36,000 faces roughly, so maybe I'll just set this to like 36,000 faces. So I don't necessarily need it to be a lower resolution, I just want these more uniform. And I'm going to leave all the other settings alone. I'm just going to ask it to, hey, just go through, I want you to keep the basic shape of this source model, but I want you to spread out the topology so that ZBrush can handle it better. And then I'm going to press apply. Now I'm not going to press apply because that's going to take like a good 2 minutes to let Maya do its thing. That's why I duplicated this group. So I'm going to turn this group off, and I'm going to turn this group on. This is create group high 1. And you can see the output. Maybe not. Why is it not showing? Oh, do I still have, sorry, I still had solo mode, or not solo mode, but isolate selection. Solo mode is Toon Boom. I'm jumping to too many softwares this week. Alright, so I had a isolate selection on where you grab something and press Command 1 or Control 1. So if you look here at this crate, and let's actually turn on both crates so that you can see the difference on that, how that final result turned out. And let's just take a close look at them. As you can see, there's virtually no difference in these crates. However, if we turn on wireframe on shaded, you can see this one is the original and this one has got a more spread out topology. And so that's going to be what we're going to want to use for ZBrush, something with a little bit more, like a little less stretchiness, a little less rectangles, a little bit more square. And because it's going to have a much better time dividing this up than dividing this up for the sculpts. Okay? So again, you don't have to do this to every piece, but I definitely recommend doing this to the main crate. So I'm going to take this original crate group and I'm going to turn it off. And this is the crate group, this crate group high, and I'll just rename it. So, oh, that's right. Let me just change this so that it's named high. So I'm going to take this group, and I'm going to go File, Export Selection, and I'm going to name it Crate High. And once I've done that, I am ready to pop this into ZBrush.